All right, so here's the link, guys. So if you guys want to jump over to YouTube, and then we'll just follow along there. We will go over the week 4 discussion, yes. All right, so I've created here. So one of the things I noticed is, sorry, family just visiting.
Hello, big guy. How are you? You're climbing everywhere. Hi, Sol. How are you, big girl? My God, she's growing. She's going to be a string bean.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this, guys, but I want to cover some examples of who I think did a good job on this, and I think some of the ones that that still need to be fixed. Okay, and I'll explain why. So so this one's solid work. This works. So we have our set of 9 tiles here. All right, and let me just copy this.
So, if whatever happens, then your mother takes over if she survives. And the survival of that is, if all my children goes before me,
All right, so we have this. So this works because, and everyone can hear me okay?
you have my own family. Good. See you guys. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so this works. Why does this work? Because we have our set of 9 tiles here. Okay, it's not obvious because it's so seamlessly done. It's hard to tell, right? But ultimately, that's what we want. We want for these to look like they hook up perfectly, and I'm not getting this quite right. I'm gonna see. I don't know what your grid measurement was. Let's see. Set my grid to 128. All right, so this is not quite, the document here is not quite aligned to the tiles. It's slightly offset, so the scaling is a little bit off. But you can kind of see that, and these tiles might even be bigger. So I don't know the exact size of the tiles that you used, or if the document you uploaded, if you changed the proportion slightly. Just be careful that whatever you use, whatever you export, it's consistent with the size of the tiles that you used initially. Okay, but in general, so we have this. We have a set of 9 tiles. Yep.
That one, okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. But there's gonna be a delay because you're gonna hear me after. That's okay.
Okay. Sorry, yeah, that was just so that I could show all of my tiles on one sheet. I have another file for it.
I see. Okay, don't worry about it. All I want to illustrate to people, and this is what I kind of noticed, And my lines here aren't super accurate, but you see how this little green kind of stem, see how it comes up here? And in this adjacent tile, we have the same thing. So we have this, it hooks up perfectly to this. So this entry point here hooks up perfectly to this exit point here. And we want to have these kinds of things. So I would expect to see at the bottom of my tile that at the top here, right? At the top here, we have something hooking in. So we do have that here as well. Okay, so there are some of you, what you did with your tiles, you'll have like maybe like a patch of dirt or something here, right, at the corner of your tile. But then there's nothing in the top corner here to hook into that. So you'd expect at the top here, right, and you expect here, right, that there's something that kind of coincides with whatever you've established there, right? So so that's the main thing. And over here, so that's the main thing that I noticed that was missing, right? So you want to have like a patch that it'll hook up, right? So if I were to mirror this, and I'm not that great with still not that great with Krita, but if I were to copy paste this, right, assuming this were the exact dimensions of my tile, so first Control C, Control V, and then I moved this. It's not quite right, but you see how, or where I went wrong here. So that's where I went wrong. But if I were to have this, see how here this is problematic because I have a patch here that's not reflected in the tile, in the top of the tile, right? So I get a weird kind of clipping effect, right? So this weird juxtaposition of two very different treatments to the tile, right? So that's problematic, and there were still a few submissions that looked like that. Now the best way to fix this again is to just start off with a simple blank tile like so. So this document is 128 pixels by 128 pixels. If I turn on wrapping mode, so if I don't turn on wrapping mode and I paint that tile, right? So maybe I have some dirt or whatever here, right? If I don't turn on wrapping mode, this automatically disqualifies itself as a kind of a tileable element. It won't work. If I press Shift W here, you'll see that right here I have that problematic juxtaposition. I have this here, right? So this does not work for a tile. So that's kind of the main thing. Some of you are, I think, having problems turning wrapping mode on. If you Shift W doesn't work for you for whatever reason, you can always go up to View and click on Wrap Around mode. Okay, View, Wrap Around mode, turn that on. All right, and that is that's the kind of key thing that you'll need to make sure you do. And so if I turn that on and I draw that patch now, right, I can draw the full boundary of it, or I'm not cut off by the edge of my canvas. And I don't really have to worry too much about where these patches go. It'll just work. Now if I turn wrapping mode back off, you'll see how I don't have a problem here because this island or this little patch continued over here, right? So that will hook up, right? And this little part that dips off the screen here will continue up here. All right, so that's the main thing that some of you guys didn't rectify. So that is something that it won't be necessarily apparent now when you make your first set of 9 tiles, but it will be very, very apparent once you go to set these tiles up, once you start trying to use these in an actual tile set. Okay, so you just need to make sure that that is all sorted. All right, my head is kind of clipping off here, but that's okay. So that's the main thing that I saw in some of the submissions. Another thing, super important with your tiles, for when you're actually going to use them, it's important to, if I make a new document here, and if I just make it, say 5 inches and 5 inches. With this new document, you'll want to I'm going to turn on my grid mode, so Control Shift apostrophe, and I'm going to set my grid steps to the size of my tiles. In my case, it's 128 by 128. And I'm going to import a few of the tiles that I've made previously. So on my layers here, I'll just hit, whoops, not plus, but I'm going to go to File Layer. I'm going to navigate to the file where I have my tiles. Okay. And this came up because some of you, it's totally valid, but some of you, when you put your tiles in, you weren't having them aligned perfectly to this grid, right? So you'll have them maybe slightly askew. And if I were to duplicate this, you might have them arranged like this, right? So it's not super precise. And you might think, okay, that's fine, it's no big deal, but it is actually going to be a really big deal later on. Because what's going to happen is when you need to work with this programmatically, your engine needs to be your programmer or whoever is kind of saying, take this file. So if I export this file, you're going to say, starting at pixel 00, move across on the x-axis however wide my tile is. In this case, it's going to be 128 pixels, and then move down on the y-axis by 128 pixels. So if for whatever reason you don't have this aligned properly, what your game engine is going to look for and what's going to pull in is going to look like, let's go from the corner here. I got to get a new mouse. Sorry guys, my mouse has been acting up. But it's going to get this area here, right? And so this is not the full tile, right? So it's just, you need to make them like flush to one another. And you need to be very precise in terms of the size of your tiles and everything like that. Otherwise, even if you did a really good job and your tiles are in fact perfect, if you don't lay them out properly in the end, you just won't be able to work with them effectively. Okay, and this applies to tiles for environments, but it's also going to apply for characters if you're making a sprite sheet. And I apologize, I did not check yet if Krita will export sprite sheets. One of you guys can explore that. I would hope that it could. If it can, that's going to be a huge win for you guys, because then you could just have your sequential animation and then directly export a sprite sheet, in which case it'll take each frame of your animation and basically just put it into a grid type structure like this. And then you can feed that into your game engine, no problem. Okay, yeah, so Ricardo, I'll look at you. Ricardo, I looked at yours, and yours is fine. Mohit, I also looked at yours, and yours is a problem. So let's go through those. So Ricardo, Prata. So, but some really good ones here. Like these are, a lot of these are solid, guys. And like I said, it really looks like most of you really get the idea. So Carolyn, here I'll say this does work, but you could probably have a better kind of hookup between your tiles. So you've kind of played it safe and you kept most of the stuff in the middle, but it'd be interesting to kind of cross that border a little bit more so that you don't have these super obvious pattern. But anyway, that's a style of design choice. I do like what you're doing here with the background and everything like that. Prata. So I don't know if this is alphabetical or not. It looks like it might not be. It's not. So, unless it's by first name. No, it's not. Let me see if I can arrange this alphabetically. Oh, I can just do this. Prato. There we go. Yeah, no, this is great. I think you did a clever thing here, which is to have your background slices, these different layers, all hook up. I think this is an excellent idea, and almost anyone could do this for their projects. And I strongly suggest actually doing something like this. So great job there, and nice to go above and beyond. Your tile set looks like it'll work perfectly. So yeah, no worries here. This is your corner pieces. Yep, so that's all good. So you got everything that you need. Good job. Okay, let's check out Mohit's quickly. All right, so Mohit, so the issue with yours is, see, you have this darkening at the bottom of the tile, but it's not reflected at the top, right? So that will, once I take this and I want to put a whole area together, it will become problematic. The other thing is maybe a design choice, but I feel like this kind of reads as grass, not roots. I don't know if this is roots or grass or whatever it is, but just be mindful of that, and also be mindful of this gap that you have, the gap in between your tiles, because that's both issues you're having, right? So A, you have the issue with the tiling, and then B, you have this issue with the offset, and this will become problematic when you go to use this in Engine. So if I copy this, copy image, and open this, file, new, create from clipboard, create. All right, so here we have this. So again, if I were to bring up my grid, you see that it's hard to tell, but I can't tell the size of the tiles. I don't know if the tiles were a little bigger. I don't know how big this document is. Let's see. Properties. Yeah, so the document itself is kind of small. Let's go for a brighter color here. There we go. Yeah, so A, maybe you sized it up, but your tiles are a little on the large size. A, and then B, they're not kind of flush together. And then C, if I were to take one of your tiles, and hopefully this makes sense. I do not do this to embarrass or disparage anybody. It's really in the pursuit of growth, right? So it's all an opportunity. There's no marks per se for this. If you did it, if you did it fully, you can get the 3 points. But it's an opportunity for me to check in and just see where people are having issues, right? So we can kind of quickly rectify it, so that when you do get assessed for the quality of your work, and the assignment, you can fix that. How do I select? I always forget how to deselect. Control Shift A. Okay, so I have too much muscle memory from Photoshop here. So see how when I put these tiles together,
I think it's because I screenshotted it using a PureRef.
I see.
I just posted it like that, and I think it messed up the sizing.
Fair enough. Okay, so when you put it into your actual, when you're going to use it in an engine, just make sure that you export it directly from your drawing application. All right, but you see here how we have this tiles that don't really hook up. And you could say that you did it deliberately, and that would be fine. But even then, you'd expect here left to right that it maybe has a proper transition, and then maybe a slightly different treatment at the bottom or something like that. But that's the main issue. If you had like a nice wave here going, if you wanted to have these two contrasting colors, and it's as simple really as taking this tile, file, new, create from clipboard, create. All right, and because I had that hooked up, if I press Shift W here to get this, I could take that color, bit like this. All right, and then you're on your way. Right, and then you're generating a brand new tile that will in fact work properly. You'll need to kind of work out what colors make the most sense and all that kind of stuff. But that's the idea, okay? And then you're off to like a good start. You have a really strong kind of foundation to work from. Okay, you can have these white dots too. There's nothing wrong with that. You can sprinkle them throughout here. You know, it's really kind of subjective at this point. But you want to make something that you do feel good about, that makes sense for your game, and all that. All right, so that's the idea. So right now you don't have this. You need something that will hook up properly, and this is what the individual tile would look like once I turn off wrapping mode. Okay, or an example of what an individual tile would look like. All right, so a couple other people wanted me to look at theirs. Yeah, so Wade. And I do want to cover some animation stuff, so I don't want to spend too much time on these, but I'll look at a few more. So Joshua, I don't know if you wanted me to look at yours or not, but Wade, I'll look at yours. All right, cool. All right, so look at Wade's. All right, cool. So this one is hard for me to fully understand what's going on. It looks like you're probably okay, but the image is kind of small. I can't do that. Open image in new tab. Huh. It looks like you're okay. Watch, it looks like something's going on with these pixels. So, not 100% sure what's going on with this. I might need to see a larger version of this. So this is this broken up, but for whatever reason, looks like your tiles are slightly off. So just make sure your tiles are square, okay? So that's the main issue I'd say for you. Make sure your tiles are square, and I guess this is your convex or concave corner, and you have some diagonals. Okay. So long as it all hooks up, what you'll want though is you'll need something to kind of fill in this dead space. So here, like where, you know, it's not the border of the world, you'll need something in here. So you'd probably want, so I guess you'll just use these. Okay, so that'll work in theory. Yep, and then you need a background. So I don't know if this is the background you intended. So you're just going to have one large kind of painted background, or if there's something tiling happening there. So that part's not clear to me, what your actual background treatment is going to be. And that's another thing actually that I noticed. A lot of the people, a lot of your background tiles were a little bit of an issue. This is, so Mithunan, this is solid stuff. I think for the most part these tiles work. Your background tile, I'd touch it up a little bit more. Again, turn on wrapping mode and just make sure that you can paint away these edges. Okay, so wrapping mode is the key. It's really easy to just kind of get these background tiles. You can create a ton of them, right? You could probably take 10 of them, make 10 of them in 30 minutes. So that's the thinking there. That's my suggestion for you. And then last we'll look at Joshua. All right, so Joshua, yours looks fine. I think this is all good. This corner piece looks like it should be fine. Actually, the only thing I'm gonna kind of pick out here, looks like these edges, see here, it ends very abruptly right here. So this should like continue more, or no, yeah, this ideally should work. You're probably not ever gonna have four corner tiles like this, but if this will work with your central tile, and I guess because that's an issue there, it is also an issue here. So I'm seeing that reflected here. So see how these end very abruptly right here? You'll just want to kind of clean those up a little bit. And it could just be a matter of the easiest way would be paint into this tile so it's shorter, not longer. But that's the suggestion that I have for you. All right, so I'm just going to quickly check our Google Meet, see if anyone's... Okay, Joshua, thank you for sharing the Meet for people who might have missed it. I'll just share it again. All right, so let's back up here. So good job, everybody. For the most part, if you yourself have an issue, as I've pointed out, please try to make sure you get that fixed. Let your classmates know if somebody's not here. If you notice that they made a mistake, let them know so they can also get that fixed. And then we'll be able to kind of proceed and go from there. All right. So the only other comment for backgrounds, it's cool to do a one-off piece, but if you look at what Ricardo did, he's a good strategy where his pieces, he can use them to make longer levels, right? So if you just use a one-off piece like this, that's square, you're kind of constrained as to how long you can make your level. So you have these tiles that you can use to make a level of unlimited dimensions, but if your background piece is the bottleneck, right, and you're limited to however far that spans, you'll need to maybe either make that a tiling background piece or figure out a way to speak to the environment in a way that makes sense. Okay. So that's the main thing I would suggest for you guys. All right. So other than that, today what I wanted to cover primarily was how to start getting into character animation. We looked at the flour sack, and I think that was a good kind of entry point for this type of stuff. But what we want to do, we want to get comfortable turning volumes in space. So we want to get a really good solid sense of how to turn forms and make them look solid and geometric and have them maintain volume as they tumble and turn through space. Okay, so we're going to do some exercises today that will help us, and we're going to talk about something called anchor points as well, which will allow us to have, say, a character's arm or head or facial features stay in the right position as our character moves through space. Okay, so let me close these down. File, close all. All right, so okay. So one of the things that we want to be able to do when we're working with characters and 2D animation in general, okay. Yeah, sorry, Natasha. Sorry, I'm just seeing your comment now. I will definitely check it out on the break, though. Just remind me, and I'll bring it up and take a look. Anyone else who wants to have theirs reviewed as well. All right. So what we want to do, though, for now is look at how can we have characters move and tumble in space. Get my animation set up going here. So so far we had this flour sack. Right, and that was a really good kind of primer for what we're gonna do. Because we have this flour sack and we can do things like we can make it bend and twist. All right, so we can make it bend over. We can do twisting. All right. By the way, I'm sure you guys know this, but you can hold down the Shift key in Krita to just change your brush. Hold down Shift and drag your cursor. I was looking for that everywhere. I had to look it up. But anyway, so we can make our character twist. As well. I don't know if I'll ever get used to the way we erase here in Krita. But yeah, so we have this, but what we want to be able to do is have things like characters' faces. All right, and be able to make the character turn their head, look up, look down. In a way that makes sense, right? So we want to consider how can we do this, and one of the key ways is just really using these lines that I'm putting in, like these cross contour lines, and making anchor points on our character, right? So if we have our character face, we want to think of like certain things like ratios, for example. So if we were to divide this into 3, our character's nose and eyes or whatever are kind of down here in the bottom third. Okay, so we can try to be consistent with that as much as possible. We want to think volumetrically. As well. So we always draw cross contour lines, and we always draw through, right? So we always think of our forms volumetrically. Okay, so we've been doing this. We looked at structure last semester, but now we're going to see why that's so valuable, why that's so important. Okay, and basically when we draw things in animation, especially, we want to have like a really good way of simplifying things down, right? So we want to kind of have our complex shapes they're a combination of more simple shapes and simple forms. So our head, generally speaking, always just starts with a sphere, a cranium. Okay, almost always we start with a cranium. And again, this is primarily talking about more classical style Disney animation, where things are a little bit more based in reality, right? So they are very stylized and idealized, but at the same time, they're very rooted in kind of reality. So their anatomy is kind of based on regular human anatomy and everything like that. So we do have a cranium, right? And then we also have a muzzle or a jaw structure that comes off of that. And that, generally speaking, that is our two main shapes of like a Disney head, right? We play with the proportions, right? And we also need to make sure that we continue our center line down through the jaw shape here. So we might have a character, a big tough guy, right, with a big jaw and a little cranium, or even more extreme, and the mouth might be way down here. Right? Or we might have like kind of the Disney princess, where it's a little bit subtler, more of a heart shape overall, softer chin. Okay, but we're always going to have those two main forms present, almost always, right? And generally speaking, we put these contour lines on here so that we can turn this shape. So if my character is looking straight ahead, we start with this. But if my character is looking upwards, we start with that same sphere, right? We might have the same center line, but this line, we shift it up the form. We shift it up. So we're going to have something maybe like that instead. Okay, and once we do that, the rest of the structure is going to go with it. All right, so we can imagine more lines here. Sorry, my arm is getting a little tired here. But we could have this. Okay, so let's do that center line. Okay, and then the jaw shape here. We'll have to draw that overlapping, like so. It's not super clear what's going on there, but it is overlapping. So we actually, if we had a nose here, that nose would now be here. Okay, if we had a mouth here, that mouth, we'd now be looking up at it, it'd be way up here. And sorry, my scale here is a little off. Let me change my scale. And actually, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to do a TV Paint for this, just so that I'm not fighting with the application as much. All right. Okay, so we have this, and actually I'm gonna also stand up here, guys, so. Okay. Sorry, just 1 second. All right, I'm back. All right, so we have this, and we have our characters. So you might have a cranium shape like so. Draw with your arm. Remember, swing your arm to get a nice fluid motion. Okay, and we'll have our cranium shape here, and then our jaw / muzzle shape as well. Okay, usually we'll have like an eye line. That can be where those two forms kind of come together, the intersection of the two forms. Okay, we have a center line, like so. Then we're going to have eye lines, or sorry, we're going to have anchors for our eyes, anchor points. Okay, and the important thing to remember about this is perspective. Okay, so when we put these in, and always draw through, so let's just draw through these forms here. We could almost even visualize where that neck would connect into the cranium. All right, so our character's neck would come down like so. Okay, and where this jaw structure hits the side here, that's going to be where our ear emerges from. Okay, and if we were to trace this line around to the far side, this will give us the other side of the jaw, the back side of that jaw structure. And it also gives us this also intersection. So this intersection here of this side line on the head and the eye line, that's where one of my ears emerges from. And then over here is where my other ear would emerge from. So it's actually hidden. I wouldn't actually see it. So I'll know that I don't have to draw a giant ear kind of sticking out here that looks wrong. At this point, the ear is hidden. But if my character starts to turn their head, you know, a little bit more towards us, so let me try to get that. You know what? I'm going to animate this. So if we had that same cranium shape. Right, but then if the center line started to kind of move a little bit more this way, so this is the previous position, and now it's here. Okay, this will pretty much stay the same. This muzzle shape will come forward. Okay, I'm just going to step back and forth so you can see how that form is turning ever so slightly. Just continue with this back dotted line here. Okay. We have this side line where the ear emerges from, right? That's going to go through across the top, and then it's going to kind of come down to the side. See how it's also moving here as well. And then so now this ear, actually I might start to see a bit of it. It might start peeking out, right? Because it emerges from these two anchor points, or the intersection here. So I might start seeing some of that ear, and this ear here. This one will start turning away. Okay, and if we were to continue, start with that same cranium. Okay, but now let's say the head is pretty much straight on. Yeah, I'm not super worried about making pretty drawings at this stage. I'm more so trying to get the motion right. And so that's how I evaluate the success or failure of this is it moving properly? And the only way to test that is to run it back and kind of look at how the different frames work together in context. Okay, so you can see the volumes are starting to rotate there. And great point there, Nathaniel. Yes, they are based on three-dimensional forms. Yes, so it's forms that we're turning in space, right? So ultimately, that's what we want to be mindful of. We just want to simplify and potentially stylize those forms, right? To push the appeal. So ultimately, that's what we're doing. But we want to still kind of think about all the other aspects of the way things move in the real world, right? We want to think about physics, and we want to think about, how do we make things that look or move in a way that seems natural and appealing, all those kinds of things. So here we have a basic foundation, a basic head structure. But what we want is a little bit more information. We want to have understanding of like where do the eyes go, and like where would the nose go, where would the mouth go. So we want to add in extra anchor points and anchor lines here. So we want to, for example, for the mouth, we'll put another horizontal kind of line running around the form here. Okay, and that's just going to indicate where the mouth will sit. Okay, we can also do the same thing for the nose. So the base of the nose, so at the bottom of our nose, we'll want to figure out where does that sit, and that's going to straddle this center line, right? So it's just basically going to sit across that center line. One thing to be mindful of this, and I don't know if I'm doing a great job of it here, and I'm going to back up, is we still need to just respect perspective. So still think about where's your horizon line. Think about, what would that line look like? And this is going to basically tell us where would this line intersect the center line there, right? So if I'm looking a little bit down on the character, these lines will all be skewed diagonally downwards a little bit. So this ellipse will be kind of like that. This nose line will be something like this. And the eye line will be something like that. I already kind of have it there. Sorry, this might be a little bit hard to read with all these extra lines that I'm adding. Basically, what we want to find is like, if this is the center line, okay, this is our eye line, okay, say this is our nose line here. I want to find a small segment here on the nose line. That's going to represent like the footprint of my nose. Okay, so I can almost even just go like that. Depending on how high up my nose goes, or the character's nose goes, you basically draw on the surface of our form, right? This is basically like a footprint of where that nose would sit. And then the mouth, same thing. I just want to find like the corners of the mouth, the segment. Keep in mind here foreshortening. Okay, so if I were to look at this head straight on like this, we'd have a nose here, right? And let's just pretend the mouth would be here. Let's say the eyes are here and here, right? So fine, that's all good. It's all fine and good, but if I go to rotate this a little bit, and then I look at it, you'll find certain things. If I'm looking at it from here, I'll see more of this part of the nose full on, and this part is going to be shallower. So this nose will look something like this to me. if I were to have this thing here, I'd see more of the one side of the nose. Right? And then just a little bit of the far side of the nose. Okay, if any of the far side of the nose. Okay, so my perspective here. Right? In the actual width, the foreshortened part of the nose is only going to look like this wide, and the straight on part that I'm seeing is going to look that wide. Similar things happen with like eyes and the mouth. So the eyes aren't necessarily going to be flat like this. The eyes are a little bit more curved. So I'll see this near eye a little bit more full on. And this other eye will be a little bit more narrowed out, a little bit more foreshortened. Okay, same thing for the mouth. If I were to imagine the mouth is two chunks, because the mouth actually kind of wraps around the form a little bit. The near half of the lips will be more full on, and the other half will be a little more foreshortened. So what generally happens when I look at a character in 3/4, we get an eye that's foreshortened on one side, which basically means it is left to right, it's narrower. Okay, similar things happen with the nose. See the nose more so a fuller shape to the nose on the near side versus the far side, where it's more foreshortened. Right, and then same thing happens to the lips. The far lip, very narrow compared to the near side of the lip, which is a little bit wider. Same thing for the bottom lip there. Okay. Where this cheek is makes a difference on the character, so I can tweak the silhouette here of this cheekbone into the cheek, into the chin. And that will change a lot about the appearance of the character. But the thing is, ultimately, you do need to reduce all of this into manageable, simplified shapes, so that you can make this character rotate in space appropriately. Okay. Another thing we want to add is a brow, or like a bandit's mask, like from a raccoon. And that's going to basically go just adjacent to the corners of each eye. It's going to wrap around the brow, like so. And this can go below as well. So this is only for placeholder or kind of anchor point. And one thing I'm noticing here, my perspective is a little bit off. I need to lift the corner of this mouth, right, so that I respect perspective properly. But yeah, we also have this bandit's mask, and then the eyebrow can just sit into this form. Okay, so when we're doing this, when we're mapping this out, blocking things out, we do want to map these things out. We want to get the corners of our mouth. I just realized something. Yeah, so we want to get the corners of our mouth positioned here. Okay, we want to get the anchor points of our nose. So basically, where does our nose come in contact with the face? So we're drawing through. We're drawing the contact position of our nose to the face. Okay, and then we can build out the structure of our nose afterwards. Okay, we want to also have this brow structure. like so. And then this line here, that can basically represent our eye line. On here, we want to figure out what is the width of our eye structure in there. And what does that look like? Okay, and that's ultimately what we need to kind of map things out down to in order to get things to work properly. Okay, so it is a lot to keep track of, but if you work methodically and you kind of take this approach for each drawing that you make, it will help and it'll make sense and it'll help you to keep your characters more quote unquote on model, which basically means you're able to redraw the same character from different angles over and over again in a believable way. All right, so ultimately that's kind of what we want to be able to do. Okay, so we can map these forms out, and we can use these like where things cross as like reference points, right? So we can think of reference points. We can look at how much things moved. So this moved from here to here. So we can kind of factor that into where the corner of this eye mask, how much that would also move, right? From here to here. It's really just kind of like analytically kind of mapping this stuff out, breaking it down, really trying to think it through. We have our nose line here, right? And we have the breadth of our nose, the width of our nose was here, but now we're going to translate that across to here. Okay, so our nose structure is going to be something like this. From the front, our eyes, same thing. We'll just map out where these anchor points sat and try to keep the same kind of volume structure to the eyes. And again, we don't do it all in one shot. We do kind of map this out slowly and surely. We are doing a rough pass first, right? We're doing a rough pass first, and then gradually moving towards our more final version. When you see the representation of the arcs here, you can see how these arcs actually translate directly into the animation. So using arcs here, I'm already actually taking care of one of my principles. Same thing with solid drawing. So those things are being spoken to. Okay, and ultimately that's how we go and we observe. So we don't just say, yeah, because I did it, it will work. We actually look at it, we break it down, and we almost go in and we say, we tweak it in order to keep it reading properly. So look at this eye, see where my cursor is, and I'll do this all the time. Because we're working digitally, we can do things that we can't do traditionally. If I were actually doing this on paper, some of the stuff that I'm trying to do is hard, but if I were to actually hold my cursor here and step through, I can see what that relative change is, so I can almost keep this as a reference to that last position. All right, so we can kind of get a really strong sense of how things are moving, whether things are jittering, moving back and forth, or whether they're moving consistently, smoothly forward. And this I might need to move more over a little bit more. And same with this. But that's always our test. We always test by flipping, right? We just step forward and back, forward and back. Does it work? Yes or no? Is it reading properly? This piece, I think it needs to move over a little bit more. And And the nose here, look at the nose, how I have it popping up. So see how low I drew the nose here, but then how high I drew it here. So that's definitely kind of a consistency issue that I need to fix. So again, that is something that you see me rectifying here. Okay, so already it reads way more believably, right? Because the volumes aren't popping and moving around in a weird way quite as much. Some things, small things, make a huge difference, and that is frustrating at times, but that is the reality of it. Like you do have to be very attentive to the details in order to get it really reading properly. And again, this kind of comes back to the importance of nailing down your keys. Get your keys like absolutely correct, and then it'll be a little bit simpler for you to kind of go back in and do the in-betweens later on. Generally speaking, when our character's head turns, also we don't have their eyes open. Usually you're gonna blink or close your eyes during a head turn like this, which does make things a little bit easier. Okay, but that's basically how I'm approaching this. Is does that read? Does that register? Yes or no? Let's keep going here. Okay, so we'll do this again. I'll do it with a simpler character. But this is a fun exercise to really try to create something for the first time that feels very volumetric, especially a face or a head kind of rotating around is a very rewarding thing to do. It's a very common exercise, animation training exercise. There's two different exercises we could potentially take a look at. One involves basically your character looking and kind of looking somewhere else like that. And one is basically a full kind of three-dimensional rotation of your character's head, you know, all the way back to its beginning position. Okay, so that's effectively how we use those anchor points to try to keep us on track with this kind of stuff. All right, so hopefully that's a little bit helpful. I'm not thrilled with what the eyes are doing, but the nose and mouth are not too bad. Some of the cheek shapes are also a little bit problematic in terms of the silhouette, but those are things that we can think about how we might fix them later on. But does this make sense, guys? Hopefully this is fairly clear. I'd like for you guys to do something like this for your weekly activity. And you can do your own design, but I'd also like it to be your own character. So whatever character is going to exist in your game, I'd like it to be that character. All right, we'll just go through this a little bit longer. And I also want to touch on the relevance of the flour sack and how that relates back to when we go to do a full body character. But first, let's continue with this. So again, we can make any kind of head shape that we want. We don't have to have this kind of Disney style structure, but we do have to figure out how we can turn whatever head shape we do choose into something volumetric, right? So if I have a head shape that is kind of like a trapezoid type shape, so it's fairly simple. I need to break it down. Again, think about my ratios. So the eyes maybe are at the top third. Maybe they're very close together. And let's say the mouth is second third here. And maybe it's pretty wide. and the nose can just sit somewhere in the middle there. Maybe it's halfway between the two, or you'll figure that out. But it's nice to have those like easy to kind of consider relationships. Okay, so if this is our character, it makes things a little bit easier than what we were doing before. But we still need to maintain consistency as we kind of go to redraw this design. So if you just start with the concept first, that's fine, but you will need to kind of reverse engineer it and figure out what the structure is. So let's kind of do that. And I've kind of alluded to it slightly, but we can imagine here, this is a very kind of cylindrical type shape. Okay, so this is that mouth line. We have this nose structure here, a couple of eyes here, a little bit of an eye mask going there, and that's basically it, right? So nothing too crazy. We can maybe draw back here. So if we imagine what this looks like from the side, it would kind of maybe have this kind of a shape. Okay. And when we're going to rotate a character, it is actually something that we need to do is really work out what does the design look like from multiple angles. So we need to really be mindful of that. Okay, so what does it look like from the side? What does it look like from the front? What does it look like from a 3/4? Right, so this will, the side view here will give me information like, does he have an underbite? Right, things like that. How far back do things go? Like, so how far back is his ear? It's not ultra clear here, but those are things we want to consider. You know, where does his neck emerge from? What does that look like? And all those kinds of things. If he has hair, what does the hair look like? Etc., etc., etc. Okay, I'm just going to evolve this design slightly. So I started with a very simple shape, but I've just tweaked it just a little bit to suggest a little bit more, just a little bit more anatomy, like more of a jaw structure here, more of a difference between the cranium and the jaw, or the upper face and the lower face. And that's basically it. That's ultimately what we need to do, guys. Is just take your design. You want ideally a front, side, and 3/4. And some of these are fairly easy because you could just draw these lines across. And it's really just a matter of making a determination, you know, as to what design choices do you want to be reflected from the front to the side, from the side to the 3/4, and all that. So you're really just designing your character at this point in 3 dimensions. Okay, and then from that you can start to analyze, break it down, put in your anchor points, and then start rotating and turning the form in three-dimensional space. Okay, and again, the key is simple to complex. Work in very kind of gradual, not complicated stages. Map out the big structure, the big forms, the big shapes first and foremost, and then gradually wheel your way down to the kind of finer and finer details. Okay, so I'm noticing a discrepancy here in terms of where the ear is. Okay, I like from the front view, I like the lower ear, so let's make that sure that's reflected here in the side view. Same height to the ear. Okay, the side view is going to tell me things like what does the silhouette of the back of the character's head look like? What does the silhouette of the front look like? So is the head flat like this, or is there a bit of a brow, right? Which is what we typically expect on a character. There's a bit of a dip here where the eyes are. And then things come back out. Right? And again, what is that profile? So does the character, for example, like this, have an underbite, you know? Or does the character have an overbite? These are all things that we have control over as the character creators, as the designers. It's up to us. Okay, and then once we have, usually you're going to go front, side, 3/4 in terms of the order of these drawings. And then once you have that, then you can start meaningfully kind of thinking about how do I break this down further, and how do I make this into an actual concept that I can animate. Okay, just like with the keys, you'll spend more time at this stage really nailing down the design, the shapes of the character. So this is where I started. I'm going to iterate, and we'll wind up closer to our final version of this character based on these other drawings I've already established. So I have my front and side that I'm fairly happy with. Okay, and now we want to do our 3/4. And the key here is like just making sure that you are armed with as much information as possible. So when you have kind of thoughts or questions, or you're not 100% sure about what your character might look like from a certain angle, hopefully you've kind of worked it out, or at least you have enough information to kind of triangulate, to the approximate correct position, or the approximate correct relationships that your character should have. For example, when they look up or they look down, or something like that. Okay, so center line, nose structure with foreshortening, mouth, I gave him a bit of a overbite. Eyes are super simple, they just sit here in the middle. I did that deliberately just to keep it a little easier. And eye mask, like so. Chin won't go quite so broad on the side view, or in the 3/4 view, sorry, here. Ears low, about here. Hairline. Okay. I want to reflect the brow here a little bit more, so I want to make sure that this comes forward a bit. probably also want to reflect that slightly here. Get more of a jaw structure going as well. And so that's my character, and it's really as kind of simple as what I decide, you know. It's what I want it to be. It just matters, just so long as I can make it believably consistent from drawing to drawing to drawing. I may need to play with this jaw a little bit, but I think I should be okay. Okay. So that's my character. Just tighten up like some final details here, like the shape of the chin. This front view seems a little bit of an outlier, and also this side view. I think certain things like the depth of the head and the width of the head aren't 100%, you know, consistent with what I've got here going to 3/4. So we'll want to kind of like look at these and just make sure that the three kind of work nicely together. So I might have to just tweak a couple things, and it might just be what I've done with the mouth here. It's a little hard to tell what's going on with some of these lines, but I'm gonna thin out the silhouette here a little bit, round out the jaw slightly. And just clean it up a little bit. All right, so the key is make sure that these drawings look like the same character, right? Similar proportions. You've used your horizontal lines here and map things out. Okay, and then from here we'll want to kind of break it down further, really figure out what that structure is. I started with an idea, okay, but then I've evolved that idea and I've iterated on it, and I'm coming towards something that is a little bit more workable, maybe a little bit more complex, but more ideally appealing, something I can work with or feel better about working with. All right. And if we were going to do like a full rotation on the head, we'd also want to find like a 3/4 back view, a back view, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so those would be other views that we would want to get. Let me just make sure I'm happy with this side view relative to everything else. I think I need to make the depth of the head a little bit less. So I'm going to shallow out some of this. Let's move these closer together, like so. So it's almost like when we get to this stage where we're almost thinking like, to some degree, like an engineer. We're thinking about the structure, the overall kind of way this thing's put together, you know, and we're really kind of mapping it out, making a blueprint of how our characters' shapes come together, what the forms look like. And that's what we're going to refer back to, you know, when we go to animate it, right? Because we really want to be very, very kind of like intimately kind of aware of like, you know, every little nuance of the character's face, right? We want to know, where's that chin go? Like, you know, what is in front of what? What's above what? You know, all those things. what do all these things kind of, what does everything kind of come together like? And I picture this nose as being a little bit bigger. So just trying to reflect that here. And we just want to make sure that these things are lining up, nostrils are lining up properly, ears are lining up. Etc. All right, and that's basically it. I don't need this anymore. That was like part of my path. That's what led to kind of my more finalized version of the design. But ultimately, that's what we want to do, and we want to kind of then go in and rotate this out. So. Two things. I'll give you guys a choice on how you want to approach this. You can either do a straight rotation, which might be a little bit harder, but if you want to challenge yourself, you can do it a full kind of 360-degree rotation. Oops. In which case you would also need the 3/4 away. The way I would do that, I basically just front 3/4 away would basically be, if I were to draw through, right? Draw through, find that far ear. That far ear would be maybe somewhere about here. Where's that neck going? The neck's going something like this. Erase all the details here inside the face. Okay, and that's basically my character. Looking the other way. We can get, there's degrees of like precision that we can get here. We can get a lot more accurate and a lot more precise with this. To do this super effectively, what we would ultimately want to do is we want to like basically have a top-down understanding of our character. Okay, also a pivot point. So think about where we want our character to rotate from. And then want to have our nose, our eyes. In this case, our eyes are kind of close together. Where are the ears? All that kind of stuff. Say, let's do the hair too. And we want to do like even steps. So we'd want to rotate this by say 45 degrees exactly. And that would have to represent our 3/4. We'd have to make sure that the pivot point is staying in the same spot as well. Basically, we'd have that. Then we'd have our side profile here. Then we'd have our reverse 3/4 here. Then we'd have our back. Our back would be a trace over from the front. Let's do that. Probably want to flop this. Okay. Neck. Hairline. That's a new one we need to include. Okay, and then back through the other side. We basically have to kind of go, we could probably take these. Oops, I want this one too. And basically put that in, map that out, get that to rotate, and then do all our in-betweens. So we could test this out, see if it works, fix what doesn't work, and then kind of go from there. Just continue with this. It's facing away. Make sure the pivot point is in the same spot. All right, and that's basically. So the hair needs to be fixed since it's not symmetrical, correct? Yeah, so the hair would be an issue. Thank you for that. I may or may not do it here, but let's see. So it tilts to the character's left. It's to his left, so we can imagine it kind of flopping down here. It's to his left. Oh, did I miss a drawing? What happened here? No, that's right. So to the character's left here. To the left. To their left still, let's say. Could still theoretically be going to the character's left. Wait. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, so this is gonna go like this. There we go. But yes, that is a good example. That's the kind of attention to detail you do want to have. You don't want to kind of gloss over things like that. It's easy to kind of like say, oh, I can copy paste or, you know, flip these and then, you know, it just works. But you do need to think about all those different things. Okay, so the one is just doing the full 360 rotation. So this would really just be the start. And then after that, we'd have to make sure that that everything else works properly. Now the challenge with this is ultimately we would want this to work in perspective. So yes, this would represent a good starting point. But ultimately what we need to do is and I'm just going to draw it below so we can have a really good understanding of what this means. We need this pivot point. So we need to think about where does our character's head rotate from. So I have this little character. I'm going to wait till you guys can actually see it. Or can I see that you guys can see it? So we have this, right? So we could have a pivot like pivot somewhere behind the head. So the character pivots around this point and kind of goes like that. Right? I don't know how clear this is going to be, but or we could have the character just basically the pivot point is like straight to the top of the head, and it just pivots like, whoops, like that. Right? So we could do it one of two of those ways, or it's however we want, but we do need to establish what is that pivot point. In my case, I would want it to be the center of the head, in which case if I did have a body, right, we'd see the body kind of sweeping out further, right, because its distance from that central pivot point is going to be wider. So what that basically means is there's going to be a vertical slice, or kind of a vertical vector, I guess, here that doesn't move, right? And we can imagine that being straight through the top of the character's head. So if we have perspective, so we also need to think about perspective as well. So what's that horizon line? So if with this as a starting point, let's actually knock this down a level. So with this as a starting point, assuming, let's say our horizon line, we also want to determine where that's going to be. So let's say our horizon line is basically at eye level. So our horizon line is here. And then we want to make sure the character rotates. We want to figure out what that pivot point is. So we'll use this. But imagine down below, if we had this let's actually use this. So let's say we have this, if I find the center of this, it's here, and I extend it up. Oops, I want this to be dead center. Let's just imagine it was like extended up like that. Okay, then we need to think about a couple more things, like what's the volumetric structure of our head? Like how do we break it down? So let's basically analyze that as well. I'll do this on another new layer. So we can think of this as like kind of either a boxy shape, and this is a decision I need to make. Is this a kind of a boxy shape, or is it more of a cylindrical shape? And what is this jaw structure like? Is it kind of fairly flat in the center, but it's got a bit of a roundness to it? So is it something like this? Is it kind of like a wedge shape? And what I probably want to have is some roundness up top here. So this is pretty round. Okay. So if I were to look at this from the top, it would be kind of like that, right? So there's kind of some clear sides and a clear front and back, but it's not totally square. It's very kind of rounded. It's a bit of a rounded off square. Okay, if we kind of go here, dot, 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 dot. If we continue the center line, go something like this. Okay, and if we're to draw through on this jaw structure, we get something like this. Okay, and then ultimately I need to think about where's that pivot point here on this structure? Where's that center point gonna be? And if I were to go up here from the ear, across here, and let's say maybe that center point is going to be right there. So I want that to be consistent throughout. I want to respect my horizon line, and I want to make sure that I have this three-dimensional structure. So my mouth line is going to have to be looking down on it. The nose line here, I'll also be looking down on it slightly. The eyes are pretty much right on that horizon, so we're pretty much okay there. The hairline will kind of be looking up at that, so that'll be rounded out this way. Ears will be here. And then ultimately what we want to do is just make sure that we can have our forms sitting nicely on that on our structure. Make sure it's volumetric. Make sure that it is respecting perspective. And then just go from there. We want to make sure that we continue that and make sure that we keep the right point of our character dead center. So in this case, it's going to be like right just past the top of the center of the head there. So just over the brow, right? Or just over the top of the, almost right, basically almost right, slightly forward from center, going through the top of the head. Okay, so that's the part we basically need to keep anchored. So when I go to animate this, I keep this vertical line consistent. So it's going to be about here. Right? And I can plot out the arcs as well. So assuming this is in perspective, the chin is going to actually kind of move forwards and back. So that's actually going to, if it's sticking out further forward here, you can almost imagine we're going to have something like this, an ellipse. That goes like that. Like this. And I can use this as part of my planning, right? Because that's what we do. And we put notches on here, right, to get our different in-between points. All right, so we want to have 45-degree notches here. Okay, front, back. Okay, so that's actually the chin at the, when it's going behind, I won't see it, but it'll be up here. And when it's at the side, it'll be here. And when it's at the front, it'll actually dip further below, and it'll be like something like that. And I'll want to do something similar here for the mouth. Okay, the side view is nice because it's going to give me the widest points of this ellipse. Okay, and again, respecting perspective. Whoops. We're looking down on this form because it's below the horizon line. Okay, I'll just dot out the part that we can't see as well. I'll do that here as well. So that represents the back of that ellipse. And then the nose, same thing. This represents the widest point. Okay. This one's going to be even shallower because it's getting closer and closer to the horizon line. Just dot that out, the back side. Okay, and we'll do the same thing for the brow. Again, using this center okay, so notice how we have this for the brow. We'll have something like this for the eye. So this is basically just taking our horizontal lines, those level lines, and then actually plotting them out into three-dimensional space. Okay, and again, this is just part of our planning. This would basically could sit below as a planning layer. Okay, so as we kind of go to plot this out, this could be part of our planning steps. Just like we did with, you know, the arcs, you know, and plotting those out, we can use this. And I'm very deliberately not rushing through this. I'm trying to like really break it down each like step, even if it feels like a little bit overkill. Doing it this way will give us a lot of control over mapping this out in 3 dimensions. And you'll find that animation in particular, 2D animation in particular, is a lot of that. It's a lot of really breaking things down, trying to make as few assumptions as possible. You might get to a point, you know, if you do it a lot, where you feel very like confident and you have a really good sense of how things would work in 3 dimensions, and you don't have to go through each last little step. But almost like invariably, it will be helpful to kind of go through this process, you know, for everything. And you'll find, because our character, of course, is not symmetrical from the side here, we'll have to think about what's that backside doing as well. So while the front is pivoting one way, the backside here is going to have like a different treatment as it kind of moves through space. So that the width here is going to be a little bit wider, right? So it's going to be a similar style ellipse, just a little wider. So I hope I'm not confusing everybody here. And similar stuff at the back here, right? We'll have another ellipse. All right. Same thing for the ears. Ideally, we figure out what the ears are doing. For now, we'll just kind of work with what we have. We might also want to get this back here. This is going to be really key. So where the kind of the neck kind of like it gets hidden by the shirt. So we'll want to find the width there. So again, this is the harder way, right? So for those who are in good shape with their tile sets, if you feel like you're pretty straightened out that way, this is kind of maybe something, if you want to challenge yourself, you'll do this. But regardless, this should be helpful in terms of us kind of simplifying this animation process, making sure that we have things planned out effectively and all that. All right, so that's what we're gonna have. Okay, and then we're gonna have this kind of point here. So this is kind of how everything should kind of work. So what I can do now is I can make a new document, file, new project. Let's go for something smaller. Close that. So I'm going to take this, alone. Whoops. Actually. So I'm going to take this, put this in my new document. Okay, and that's going to basically kind of help. That's going to be my carousel. So you can almost think of like a shawarma. I think it's shawarma where they have the meat and you cut it and it's kind of constantly rotating. We're going to do something similar here with the character's bust. And now I'm just going to step down to the other layer. Okay, so this is my planning layer. I'll make another planning layer. So this planning layer will not, this one will be held. The first one will be held. The second planning layer, it's going to feature my rough drawings. So it's going to have my roughs. It's going to scale this up. Okay, so we'll start with this. Again, trying to maintain that central point. Again, this is just a rough planning layer, so it doesn't have to be super duper precise, but as close as possible. Oops. So I might put on my onion skin here. Probably have to shift things around a little bit after, just to make sure it is all in the right spot. But just like we did with our thumbnails previously, we're just doing a first pass on this, rough pass on the animation, just to see how it's gonna kind of get over. Make sure it's properly centered. Again, make sure it's pivoting around that kind of more towards the front of the center of the head. I'm gonna go back to see how I treated this one. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drawings. I'll set this to loop. Turn off my onion skin. And let's play this back at a slow speed. So you kind of get the sense of this will potentially work, right? So that's my rough, right? So this is not set in stone, but it is kind of a good starting point. And now with this, in conjunction with my planning layer, right? Let's make that just a little bit more apparent. I can go in and start doing my more finalized version of this that more closely respects perspective. So ultimately, that's kind of the goal of this, right? So it's just, I have to keep in mind like what's for what. I probably should have put an indication on, my planning layer, what each of these things is. So I should actually do that. And I have to reference the side view. So this one was the, let's move this over. So this is the nose. This here is the lip. This is back of the neck. This is the chin or jaw. This here is the back of the head. This is the brow, the small one. This is hair line. Hair tuft. Hair tuft. All right, so so that's basically make sure I was on the right there. Yeah. So now I can kind of more so go in here and really try to tighten this up and tie things down best as possible while respecting perspective. So the lip would be here. I didn't do anything for the nose. I probably should have. Did I? I did. Well, my nose is totally in the wrong spot then. Interesting. All right. This will be an experiment. We'll see how this goes. Interesting. Why am I so off? So the nose in the front just looks a little low. And I have two parts, two components to the nose, so I didn't fully detail it out, but you'll notice that there's a kind of a piece here that I didn't reflect. So I'm just getting the tip of the nose, but from the front I'm not really seeing as much of that. So that is something to be mindful of. That's okay. So this is where the tip of the nose would be, right here. And the base of the nose will fall below that. So I'll just, for this, eyeball it. I'll just use that as the framework to work within. Okay, eyes, fairly straightforward. Brows are going to come up. Mouth I got. Ears. I don't think I was going to eyeball the ears. Okay, chin. It's gonna go on here, right down to that line. I'm gonna do this fairly quickly, so we'll treat this as a kind of a, not a final, but like a kind of a quick, like an intermediate final, like a draft version. And if this works out properly, then I will commit to it and I'll do in-betweens. Okay, so it's not done. I still have to do the in-betweens, right? So it's still kind of like more steps, but But generally speaking, that's the idea. Remember, neck. I think this is the back of the neck here, where it kind of meets with the shirt. I should have mapped this out better, but let's just imagine his shoulders are kind of coming down something like this. So this is one part I'm kind of like just kind of going with the flow on. If I want, I can suggest a kind of like a shadowed part to the nose here, just to further speak to that form. Okay, I might want to leave on my onion skin here. Okay, and then get the side or the 3/4 version of this nose going. I should have done something for the eyes here. In retrospect, just because it's going to be very easy for them to jump around. But I'll do my best here to try to visualize like a kind of an elliptical shape here that they'll follow. And actually, it's not a huge issue because this is an intermediate drawing for me to even kind of map that out here. And I enjoy personally the freedom, mental freedom it kind of allows me when I say this is an intermediate drawing. This is not my final. I can kind of, plan a little bit more. I can kind of still work loose and rough, and I find that it's a little bit freeing. Okay, let's get the brow. So we do have an indicator of what the brow line is doing. And this really speaks to the amount of foreshortening that's going to happen because it can't extend beyond here. You see how it's dipping down a little bit? Very subtle, but because of perspective, it's actually going to go down. Okay. And jaw structure, so it's not going to be nearly so high this time, it'll be way lower. Alright, due to perspective, but the rest of it I can almost follow. Probably should have done something for the ears. The ears might start jumping around a little bit, you'll notice that. So all the lines that I would actually use in a horizontal, kind of just like if I'm doing a planning for a drawing, I probably want to do a lot of the same things when I'm doing a rotation like this, just so I have a really strong kind of perspective-based guide to kind of indicate where everything's going to sit as they turn in space. The ear here, we start to lose it, so we don't actually see that ear. So I'm already noticing some discrepancies here as well between my front to side. So the shoulders here on the on this version are much kind of they're a lot different. So there's going to be some issues, some discrepancies there. I didn't work out the form on that part as clearly. Let's get that center line or the hairline in here as well. All right, step forward. And this one looks like it should be fairly straightforward. Eyes will get a little bit smaller. Again, due to perspective. The brow line here we've established is going to be something like this. The nose will go like so. The mouth here. Something like that. And the jaw. Things like ears will get larger as they get closer to us, so keep that in mind. They protruding, right? So they'll kind of get bigger. So as I'm eyeballing this and kind of planning some parts and then kind of eyeballing some parts, I just keep stuff like that in the back of your head. Okay, so these anchor points, see that? That's telling me where this is supposed to connect. So when I have to go back and fix like the front view and all that stuff later, that will kind of be my guide. Just gonna isolate this layer. Just see, like, you know, is this actually working properly? Is it making sense? Is it reading? Yes, no. Does it feel correct, believable? Am I missing anything? Do I need a little bit more of this line here to support the hookup from this to this? And it is also important to kind of go in and do this, and not necessarily with onion skin on. Don't over rely on onion skin. More so rely on flipping back and forth. That's going to give you the truest kind of indication of whether or not the animation works. All right, because it's really just does that optical illusion of like movement actually register, yes or no? And that's ultimately what you're testing for. And so it's basically like running your code, right? Don't just look at the code and say, yeah, you know, this looks like what it should look like. Run it. Does it actually function? You know, this is basically the same as that. Okay, so run it, tweak it, run it, tweak it, or just kind of step back and forth and see what is working, what's not working, and adjust accordingly. So the ears definitely are not working for various reasons. They kind of flatten out. When I feel like as it turns, they should kind of get bigger. So again, I can't fully kind of perfect all of this, but I can hopefully kind of show you some of the thought process and the approach. So that already is working a little bit better. Not perfect, but slightly better. Yeah. So I think, I hope that you guys get the idea of what I'm trying to demonstrate here. I don't know if I'm going to continue with this. I would like to cover some other material, so we might kind of leave this where it is at this point. For your weekly activity, again, for those of you who feel like you want to challenge yourself and you're in good shape for your tile sets, tackle this. Try to do a rotating head. The only thing I'll say, and I only say this now because I didn't do it previously and I regret it, primarily with the seaweed, is once we're settled on this, please add in-betweens. And that's one thing we haven't really gone into like in depth yet, but you will want to kind of start adding more drawings in here to smooth out the animation. And I did kind of leave this as a feedback point on a lot of your flower sack submissions. But once we have our our animations roughed out for the most part, what's going on here? You're going to want to turn on your onion skin, and then assuming that you're happy with these animations, or if with these keyframes or these these frames that you've established, you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to kind of work out that what the rest of that animation looks like. So I'm going to turn this back on just so I have the arcs to follow. But basically you're going to want to start adding like in interval drawings to further flesh this thing out. Okay, and basically I'm looking at this and finding what's that in between spot. That's simply what it is. This eye and this eye, what's that in between spot? And it's actually kind of close to the one of the previous eyes I had. Okay, where's this brow position relative to that brow position? Where's the arc? You know, where's that plan also that I've plotted out? Map these and this, right? So it's a little more mindless, but not completely mindless. You still have to kind of think about, you know, what would make sense here. So you can't totally just kind of go on autopilot mode. If your in-betweens are very, very close together, if you're doing like a slow in or a slow out, you know, sometimes there you can just really autopilot. But these, there's still a lot of volumes moving through space. So I still need to think about like, how are my forms gradually turning, you know, as I do this in between. So it's not as straightforward. But ultimately, to smooth things out, there's no way of avoiding this. Like, we do have to do this at some point. Okay, the key is having good keys, right? Having good, like, kind of good decision-making drawings. That way, it'll make it your in-betweening process a lot more straightforward. Okay, and it won't break things, it'll just enhance what you have. So where's that center point again? Think of perspective. All right, so don't just find the exact middle. Think of like perspective just projecting forward a little bit. Where would that sit on this arc line? And it's about there. Okay, how much of this ear will we see? Maybe some of it, maybe none of it. I don't know. But maybe we'll kind of start revealing it there. And again, if we have bad data, if we're in betweening off of bad information, it will just it won't work. But if we do it right, we'll get a nice, more fluid transition. And then once we have the first set of in-betweens, we might want to add another set of in-betweens. You know, again, depending on how fluid you want this to ultimately become, and how ambitious you are in terms of your animation, but you might want to continue in betweening some more. So I primarily say this because I didn't kind of dig into it as much. We talked a lot about planning, which is the important part, but when we want to really kind of final polished animation, we do need to consider the in-betweens. And what used to happen in studios is you'd have a keyframe animator, like which is a really senior, like very experienced animator. They have a really good sense of how the movement should work. But then for the more grunty stuff, like the more time-consuming process of like just doing all your in-betweens and stuff like that, they'd have a junior animator to assist them. So the keyframe animator would basically put in all the main primary storytelling drawings, and then maybe the breakdowns and any important stuff, and then the assistant or junior would basically kind of take it home. So that's kind of how they could get more quality animation, without having the one person do every last thing. And that also gives the junior animator an opportunity to learn from the more senior person as well. Okay, but you see I'm just in betweening is the part where you do turn on your onion skin and you kind of just, again, not mindlessly completely, but kind of mindlessly kind of just in between those two drawings. And for something like a rotation like this, you do need to make sure that it is fairly even throughout. So you will have to, if you want to get it really smooth, you might end up with 32 drawings in total. Let's get this brow in. Okay, so you can see we're getting a much more gradual progression. I'll just do one last one here. So for your final games, you won't want rough animations. You'll want like nice, polished, clean animations, and you will have to do a few iterations to get there. Usually, so once I've kind of happy with your rough animation, and then you do all your in betweens, you will have to clean things up, and then you will have to color everything. But there's no nicer feeling, like I swear to you, there's no nicer feeling than seeing a nice, cleaned up, polished, in-between animation kind of come to life. It's very, very nice to see, especially when you have a character. Once you have a character walking or giving a performance or doing something, it's pretty amazing. And it makes all those like long hours spent plotting things out and drawing things out, makes it worth it. Especially in the case of a video game where like you get so much mileage out of a simple looping animation, like a walk cycle or idle animation or a run or a jump or whatever. Like it's you get a lot of bang for your buck versus like a feature film where you have to do that for every last sequence. You can't reuse any animation, right? Is it? necessary to have a drawing for all frames in animation. No, you can hold each drawing for 2 frames. You can experiment. Sometimes you'll hold things for 2 frames, 1 frame. It'll really depend. But yeah. So this is just to show you like what if I were to smooth everything. If I were to put on all my keys and smooth everything out, the motion would be like this smooth, right? Some things aren't working properly. I haven't mapped out all my keys effectively. Before you start in-betweening, you do want to make sure that you're super happy with all your block-in drawings, right? Otherwise, when you're in-betweening the wrong thing, and then you're just making a lot of stuff that's just not going to read properly. So again, we can take a break. We're almost towards the end of the class, though, so I think we should maybe just keep going if that's okay. Sorry, Ricardo. And we'll probably wrap in about 15 minutes or so, if that's cool. Wrap it up a little bit early. So the next thing, and then when we do wrap up, sorry, I know somebody did want to show me their tile sets. I can look at those once we're done. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about was the flour sack and the relevance of it. Our flour sack, we can almost think of that as like a torso on a character. So we have our flour sack, and for the most part, our flour sack consists of like 2 main forms. And we can maybe think of these as arms and legs as well, right? Very similar to a torso, right? So a torso, we have rib cage, spine, pelvis, and we have our limbs coming out. One thing I'll say to you guys is if you want to get better at drawing, there's probably no better training than doing animation. It's going to really loosen you up just by virtue of the amount of drawing you have to do. It will make you more confident in drawing things out and maintaining volume and structure. So anyways, we have this character, and so this basically is our rib cage, and this is our pelvic structure down here, and this in the middle is like kind of our abdomen and all of our belly stuff, our guts and all that kind of stuff, right? So generally speaking, what we have is we have like these 2 in the human body. We have these 2 kind of more rigid forms in our rib cage and our pelvis. And working with the flour sack kind of gives us a sense of working with these forms, right? So we can kind of have stuff like that. So you can imagine these blocky structures being deep to the to the design of our character. We can have, say, a leg here, arm that comes out of here, arm that comes out of here, etc. Very cool. Glad to hear that, Ricardo. That's the goal, right? Especially drawing through, right? Drawing through. You know, it's really just kind of turning on that part of your brain. It becomes second nature eventually. Well, ultimately, what we're gonna want to do, and what we're kind of gearing towards for the end of this semester is drawing characters. We want to be able to draw characters that can walk and jump and run and attack or whatever. So we want to have some kind of framework of understanding to work from when doing so. So that flour sack, we want to think of our flour sack almost whenever we work with our torso of our character, because things are going to happen when our character's walking. So what happens is usually we have a twist that happens through the torso. So we'll have our arms will swing one way, and our hips will swing in the opposite way. So imagine this being the back of our character here. This is the side. So we want to be able to twist our character the same way we twisted the pillowcase. Okay, I know some of you had it twist, some of you didn't. Some of you were a little bit more adventurous or more daring in terms of attempting that. But ultimately, that's something that you want to get ideally fairly comfortable with, so that we can kind of do interesting things. What happens in the character in a human is we get like a counter twist in the upper body and the lower body when we're walking and doing a lot of different things. So when one arm swings forward, the opposite leg is swinging forwards. All right. And we want to have a good understanding of what's happening with those underlying forms when we do that. So think of the two main structures on the pillow sack when doing so. Okay, and then the other thing that we want to be able to do is we want to take what we learned from the character, from the head, and with these anchor points and these lines and everything like that, we want to like put that on a character. So when we do go to do a walk cycle, we want to have things like a kind of a torso, all right, so imagine this being our torso. We have the underpants going there. I can imagine like an opening here for where each of the arms would emerge, an opening here where the neck would emerge, and then a head. Right? But we want to put things like a belt on our character. So I kind of have it here, but imagine the belt on a pair of underwear or something like that, and draw through. So figure out what that looks like on the far side as well. And what's going to happen is like when things happen, like when our character walks, we'll get into this later in a future week, but when our character walks, when we put weight on one side of our character's body, it's going to push this band up because our hips on that side are tilted up, and on the far side it's going to be tilted down. Okay, so this leg that's going to swing through, it's got less weight on it. Okay, so if I were to look at this from the front, sorry, the rotation here is probably confusing. But if I were to look at it from the front, we'd see this side tilts up, right? It's taking the weight, and this side is tilting down as the leg kind of swings forward. Okay, if you do get the book, Richard Williams' book, Animation Survival Kit, it's got a lot of really, really good detailed information on all this. super valuable resource that will be useful this year, but it'll be useful, next year. And truthfully, it's a if you continue with animation and game development in general, it's a useful resource like indefinitely, right? So it's probably the best animation book that's been published to date. There are a lot of good like online resources, but a lot of them are free. You can find them on YouTube. But in terms of like a kind of a reference manual, that's probably the best. So this is the kind of thing that we want to be able to indicate is what is the tilt of the hips, as well as kind of being able to manage this volume for the lower body or the lower torso and the upper torso as well. All right, so these are things that we want to eventually include into our overall repertoire, and always add that center line. Add a center line. It will help you kind of just convey more quickly and easily what's happening. Even if you're just plotting things out, mapping things out, where's my character looking, right? Just having these center lines, eye line, and a center line, I can easily tell what my character's looking at, or what they're doing. Okay, and then we can do certain things like squash and stretch, right? So we can have one side of our character's pose, squash, right? So that's the idea. You want to be able to kind of get these interesting, more dynamic forms and shapes going. Think of the torso as a flower sack. It's got the rib cage, and it's got the pelvis. Okay, you can squash one part. You can squash on one side, stretch on the other side. Okay, you can twist things, right? All kinds of things like that. And then also think about these anchor lines. Okay, so these anchor lines, these cross contour lines that we use to help us get a strong sense of what is happening under the form, helps us keep track of like where we need to start and stop things from, and all that. Okay, so ultimately that's where we're moving. We're going to get more heavily into character based animation in the coming weeks. I recognize you guys this week have to do the tile sets, so I'll keep that in mind. But for our weekly activity, I do want to see a head rotation. It can either be a full rotation, like I said, but that's for the more ambitious ones of you, or you can do something like this. Let me start a new document. So you can start something like this. Have your character look in one direction, looking at something. Okay, so again, cranium, jaw structure, center line, eye line, nose line, mouth line, ear, etc., etc. Okay, but have your characters start looking at something. These eyes are little. Okay, this is a key. key 1. You can thumbnail this out as well if you like. And where they end up looking. Trying to keep it on model somewhat here. Conscious of time. Tweak this slightly. So first and foremost, let's just check, do these two
So basically
drawings...
you just want a character looking from one side to the other?
Yes, but not quite. Almost, yes. So that, but we need to make it work first. So we start with a take. We have a start and end. Let me just make sure that, again, my keys here are solid and sound. And again, it is important to take the time to get those keys just so. For my case, I'm designing this character as I'm going, so it's going to be a little trickier, but for you guys, I do want you to work out the references and all that kind of stuff and figure out who your character is that you'll be working with this semester. So I'm just gonna start over. Sorry. So let's properly take our time and do this. Sorry. So let's get that cranium. Let's get this jaw structure. And you'll be surprised, you can get away with quite a lot in terms of like squashing and stretching things around and still maintaining the kind of appeal and the overall kind of likeness of your character. Okay, and I think I was just getting a little too far away from the shapes that I had already established. So here I'm just basically looking at similar shapes, similar masses, right? So I think I'm in the ballpark now. Not 100% there, but happier with the result. I might have some scale issues. But basically, what we're trying to do, can kind of see, does A, B work first and foremost. If that works, then we're on our way. Slightly too big, but let's just get rid of some of this. All right, so those are, let's say, our two key drawings. We're going to need an anticipation. Okay, and then a breakdown, and then eventually in-betweens. So that's kind of what we're going to start with our keys. These are our two keys. We'll do an anticipation, which is like an extreme, or one of our extremes. So we'll squash them. You don't have to squash, you know, excessively or anything like that. It's really up to you guys how you do this. Okay. So that alone, I think that works pretty well. And then we need to get from here to here. So we'll have a arc-based breakdown here. So the character is going to dip their head down as they look across, right? I probably will need a couple of drawings here. I'll put a indicate a very minor slow out just by making this first drawing fairly close to the original. Okay, step forward slightly. We're going to get something in between these two. Let's favor this second drawing here. Eyes still closed. So, sorry, I didn't have time to really bring it out, but it's that kind of idea. Just a look, swing, look to the other side kind of thing, okay? And that's what I want you guys to do for next week. Doesn't have to be a lot of drawings, but try to get something that that does give you an opportunity to kind of explore moving volumes, moving shapes, working with anchor points, you know, as you kind of move from A to B. I feel like the craniums is just a little too large here. So again, before you go to do any like final in-betweening or anything like that, you want to make sure that what you have here is nice and solid. So this drawing needs a little work. There we go. So squash. You know, I think I did like it how it was before, with this cheek coming out just a little bit more, just to maintain the volume. Okay, so when this goes in, this should come out. And I think the only main issue I have is the character's not fully on model from the beginning to the end. Ways I could fix that, I could easily just take this, flip it on the x-axis, get to the end shot here. Put that down. Try to get something that's like a little bit more of a happy medium. So I like that smile that I had, so I'll maintain that. And notice how you can like tweak your shapes fairly freely without worrying too much, so long as things are generally in the same space, and so long as also you maintain your volumes as much as possible. So I'll use this as my basis. Okay, so this doesn't have to be anything excessive. It could be like maybe 5 to 10 drawings, just to kind of get like a nice look, anticipation, and a look to another side kind of thing going. It's gonna drop that. Okay. Okay, let's merge these two down. Okay. All right, and then any kind of last little drawing issues I need to fix, I will fix. But if I play this, All right, the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to tweak those eyes. The eyes are a little bit problematic. There we go. And also to be mindful of my drawing from before. Okay, so I can't make any assumptions about these new drawings I put in. I do have to kind of test them and make sure that that it doesn't break my sequence, that it still works properly. Okay. All right, so we'll wrap here. I'll post these as an examples, and then I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. A couple of you had some questions about your tile sets, so I'll take some time now and I'll look at those. Okay, but other than that, thanks guys, thanks for sticking with me. I know this was a long lesson, but hopefully helpful. It's all good stuff, and you'll find that when you start incorporating this into your own work, it will start to make a difference. I think last thing I might do with this is I might just add in a last couple of in-betweens just to get a really nice slow in to this final pose. Or even an overshoot, maybe to a little bit of overlapping action. So go slightly too far and then kind of come back. But yeah, what I think I'll do is I'll also have like a bit of anticipation prior to opening those eyes, so they don't just open regularly. So again, favor the last position here, just to get a nice slow in. Okay, and I probably even want to like maybe one or two more just to really have it settle nicely into that final spot. Again, so we don't need a ton of drawings everywhere, but where we want it to cushion, we do, right? We need to put in a few more in-betweens in those spots just to get it really moving nicely. So whenever it's moving quickly, we can get away with less keyframes, but then whenever we want to kind of slow things down, we'll need to add in those extra drawings. All right, so let's see what that looks like. Yeah, and it might even be nice to have a bit of a squash at the end, and then kind of come out of that squash into the slow in. Let's see a little faster. Okay, so that's kind of the thing I'm looking for from you guys for this next animation. If you're going the quicker route, something like this. If you're going the more meticulous, kind of like longer, more process-oriented route, you're going to be doing something like this, okay, for your head rotation. All right, so we'll wrap here. Anybody who wants me to look at their sequence or their tile sets, just let me know if they're still here. Natasha. Whether you're here or not, I'll go through it and I'll let you know what I think. So Natasha, yours is really good. Yeah, no, this is excellent. So this, I saw this one, no complaints. I think you really got the right idea. I think the only thing I would question is, I don't know what this is. Is it a campfire or something like that? Or, yeah, that's the only thing. I don't see how this is a background piece. Okay, charred, few charred. So this is like an alternate background piece. That's fine. What I was thinking you meant, you might think about how you're going to treat these parts here in the backs of this part, if it's not just going to be black. So think about what color you want to be in there, and do you want a tile for that? But yeah, continue to think about any other alternate types of tiles you might want to have, if you want to have a path or something like that that can kind of go through. But other than that, I think this is really, really well done. Good job. No, no real issues. Okay. Yeah, so you would think about, yeah, maybe what to put here. You can also do like things like foreground stuff or set dressing stuff. So you could do like a candelabra or like this, like a pile of bones or whatever, you know, or a treasure chest or something like that. Yeah. Nazifa, yep, sure, let's take a look at yours. Sure, and Abdallah, yep. Okay. All right, so Abdallah, it works technically, I'll say, but I think like the only issue that I would have is it doesn't seem like clear what it is, right? So it does hook up, yeah, it works, but it feels more like you're just kind of randomly chosen some shapes and colors, right? So I think that's the main issue that I have is try to get it a little bit clearer on what it's supposed to be. Maybe think about getting some good reference and kind of working off of that. And then for the background, think about not just using necessarily one tile and stretching it, but think about maybe how you might use a bunch of tiles, right? So, or maybe in your case, you just have a flat blue sky, and then on another layer you have some stars or something like that. Or think about it like that. Look at also how Ricardo did his, Abdallah, and then how he has like larger chunk background pieces. So this goes for just about everybody. But what you might do is you might have a background piece that's like a mountain or something like that, you know. But the way it works, it actually hooks up back to itself. I haven't done a good job of it, but imagine it did, right? So imagine these two pieces connected seamlessly. So that's something you might do. So you just have this one piece that you keep scrolling over and over again. And then you can have different layers of that. So this is what Ricardo ended up doing, and I think it was effective. So you could have another layer behind that that's just like a clouds or a cloud, right? And they would move at different rates, different speeds. And then behind that you could have a sun. Okay, so this could be, and behind the sun you could have a sky, right? Just blue sky. So this would be layer 1. This would be layer 2, This would be layer 3. This would be layer 4, right? And then in front you'd have your tiles. So this would be layer 5. Okay, and then your character interacts with the tiles. Okay, so that's one of the things that you could look at doing, Abdallah. And then Nazifa. Okay, so this one is good. This is pretty solid. I like the animation, so that's kind of a nice touch. I think the only thing for me is when you're doing this kind of like Zelda style, like isometric-y type game, you need to make sure that on areas like this, your tiles need to have more of this kind of a treatment where you have these, I don't know if they're sunflowers or whatever they are, but you need to show how they kind of come in contact with the ground. So that's the piece that for me is missing. And I guess the other part is it's not super clear to me what your tiles are. So is this your central tile? And then as I'm looking at it now, I see this, right? How this doesn't hook up. You want this to kind of continue down here and this to kind of go like that. So you want to make sure that these are more seamless. But beyond that, I think the bigger issue is think about the treatment at the bottom. So if this is the bottom, similar to what you have here, you're going to need something like that here as well. Or this is the part that will come in contact with the ground, right? Where we see each of the different separate stalks. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's basically what I would suggest for you. And then for Abdallah, yeah, it makes sense if they're solidified portals. My recommendation, get some good reference, and that might help you further, right? Because rather than you just trying to come up with something abstract and hoping that it works, look at how other people have solved the problem, and then take what you can apply, and then add in your kind of unique element or unique take on that, right? So anchor it somewhere in something that we're already accustomed to. You don't want it to go too abstract, because again, it's just going to be too much for us to kind of appreciate. You want to kind of give us, I don't know, maybe 50% something that we've seen before, and then 50% something new, right? So that 50% that we're familiar with will give us like a bridge towards the new stuff and a way to appreciate it. So that's my suggestion. So hopefully that helps, guys. We'll wrap here. I will post that discussion for the head turns. And I look forward to seeing your guys' tile set submissions for next week. All right, everybody, take care.